We're going to talk about a leader who tried to save a global superpower, but ended up taking it apart instead.
Right, Mikhail Gorbachev.
The last leader of the Soviet Union. His decisions in the late 80s, they didn't just change a country, they redrew the entire map of the world. And they ended the Cold War.
It's a classic story of unintended consequences. What we want to do is, lay out the facts of how he rose so fast, what his two huge ideas, glasnost and perestroika, were all about.
And figure out why trying to fix the system ultimately caused it to, well, disappear.
And it all happened so quickly. That's the fascinating part.
Absolutely. So let's start at the beginning. He was born March 10th, 1931, in a small village called Privolnoye. This is deep in the Soviet Union.
And his family were farmers. Life in the 1930s, there was, it's hard to even imagine, incredibly difficult.
So he didn't come from the political elite in Moscow or anything like that?
Not at all. He grew up working. We know he was helping his dad operate combined harvesters, these huge farm machines, even during his school breaks. But he was also a really dedicated student.
And that work ethic got him noticed. He was actually given a special state medal for his studies and his farm work.
Which was a huge deal in that system. That medal was basically his ticket out. It's how he got into Moscow State University to study law.
A massive leap, right? From a collective farm to the best university in the capital.
A huge leap. And that's where he met his wife, Raisa Titarenko. She was studying philosophy. They married in 1953. And she was, by all accounts, a real intellectual partner for him his whole life.
Which was pretty unusual for the wife of a Soviet official back then.
Very unusual. So
Wow.
After he gets his law degree, he makes a really smart move. He doesn't stay in Moscow. He goes back home to his region to work for the Communist Party there.
So he's getting that ground level experience.
Exactly. And he gets a reputation for being energetic, smart, and, focused on the one thing the Soviet Union could never seem to fix: farming.
His competence just pushed him up the ladder. By 1970, he's the first secretary for his whole region. That's a position of immense power.
And with that regional power, he gets noticed by the top guys in Moscow. Eventually, they bring him into the inner circle, the Politburo.
That's the small group that makes all the big decisions for the entire country.
Right. But even there, he was different. He traveled more, he saw more of the world, and he realized the Soviet system was just inefficient. It was falling apart.
He knew it needed to modernize or it wouldn't survive.
He was a true believer in communism, but he saw that the ship was sinking.
Okay, so that brings us to March 1985. The Soviet Union had gone through a series of very old, very sick leaders who kept dying.
The era of gerontocracy, they call it. The Politburo had no choice but to pick someone younger, someone with some energy.
And they picked Gorbachev. He was only 54, which by their standards was incredibly young.
And the country he inherited was in a terrible state. The economy was weak, technology was years behind the West. He knew he had to do something bold and do it right away.
What was so different about his style?
He talked to people. Previous leaders were these remote, scary figures. Gorbachev went on TV, he walked around in public, and he openly talked about the country's problems. For Soviet citizens, that was just shocking.
A complete change. And it was all built on two big ideas, right? Two pillars for his reforms.
Yes. The first one was social and political. It was called glasnost.
Which means openness. What did that actually look like in a country where the government controlled everything you could read or say?
It was a revolution.
Mm.
Glasnost meant more freedom of speech, more freedom of the press. The government just started to back off.
So you could read books that had been banned before.
Banned books, forbidden movies. You could even start to discuss things that were completely taboo, like the crimes of Stalin. The goal was to build some trust, to get people involved in fixing society.
But isn't that a huge risk? You give people a little freedom after decades of silence, and they might just demand a lot more.
And that's exactly what happened. The idea was to have a controlled debate, to expose some low-level corruption.
But it didn't stay controlled.
Not at all. People started talking about everything, the history, the economic problems, and this new openness. It didn't lead to trust. It led to protests and demands for much faster change than he was ready for.
Okay, so while all that is happening, he's also trying to fix the broken economy. That was the second pillar, perestroika.
Restructuring. This was his plan to make the economy more modern and efficient.
How? What was he actually changing?
He was trying to move away from total government control, where some guy in Moscow decides how many shoes a factory in Ukraine should make.
He wanted to give managers and workers more power.
Exactly. And, crucially, he allowed some small private businesses to open, Little cafes, repair shops, that kind of thing.
So, introducing a little bit of competition sounds good, but how did that work out in reality?
It was a disaster at first. The economic shift was really tough. The new businesses couldn't get supplies from the old state-run system.
And that led to shortages.
Massive shortages. Suddenly you couldn't find basic things like bread or milk in the stores. So people were getting frustrated. Their daily lives weren't getting better. They were actually getting worse.
So you've got Glasnost letting people complain more loudly than ever before, and Perestroika is giving them a lot more to complain about.
It's a terrible combination for a leader. And then a real crisis hit that exposed just how broken the system was.
Chernobyl?
The Chernobyl nuclear disaster in April 1986. A reactor explodes in Ukraine, sending radiation everywhere.
And the government's first instinct was the old Soviet way, right? Keep it a secret.
They tried to cover it up,
Mm-hmm.
but it was too big. Gorbachev later said that Chernobyl showed him just how important glasnost was, that the culture of secrecy was literally deadly. It proved the system was inefficient and badly managed.
All these problems, the economy, Chernobyl, they forced him to rethink the Soviet Union's biggest expense, didn't they?
The military. He realized they just couldn't afford the Cold War anymore. They were spending way too much on nuclear weapons in the army. He needed to end the tension with the United States.
And this is where he starts meeting with U.S. President Ronald Reagan.
Yes, several times.
Right.
And they built a real relationship. In 1987, they signed a historic treaty.
What was so special about it?
For the first time ever, the two superpowers didn't just agree to limit weapons, they agreed to destroy an entire class of nuclear missiles. It was a huge step. It lowered the fear of nuclear war across the globe.
So while he's being praised internationally for peace, the empire itself is starting to crumble, especially in Eastern Europe.
For decades, the USSR used its army to control countries like Poland and East Germany. Gorbachev announced he wasn't going to do that anymore. He wouldn't use force to keep communist governments in power there.
He basically told them, you're on your own.
Exactly. And the result was, in 1989, a wave of peaceful revolutions swept across Eastern Europe. And Gorbachev, he did nothing. He let it happen.
Which led directly to the fall of the Berlin Wall.
He told the Soviet troops to stay in their barracks. That one decision allowed those nations to become free and democratic.
So in 1990, he wins the Nobel Peace Prize. He's a hero around the world. But at home,
He's blamed for everything. Rising prices, food shortages, the tension just kept building.
until the August coup in 1991, what was that?
A group of old-school, hardline communists decided they'd had enough of the reforms. They tried to take power by force. They trapped Gorbachev in his vacation home and announced they were in charge.
A return to the old ways. But it failed. Why?
Because the people, especially in Moscow, stood up to them. Citizens came out into the streets to protect their new freedoms. The soldiers who were sent to crush the protests, they hesitated. The two just collapsed in a few days.
So Gorbachev is free, but he's also lost all his authority.
Exactly. The coup proved the central government was powerless, and all the Soviet republics, Ukraine, Georgia, the Baltic states, they saw their moment.
They started declaring independence.
One after another. The momentum was unstoppable. Gorbachev tried to hold some kind of union together, but it was too late.
So what was the final moment?
On December 25th, 1991, Christmas Day, Mikhail Gorbachev went on television and resigned. He was the president of a country that, a few hours later, officially ceased to exist.
And the Soviet Union dissolved into 15 independent countries. The end of a 69-year-old superpower.
After that, he stayed active. He started a foundation working on peace and environmental issues. He wrote books, gave speeches. He passed away on August 30th, 2022 at 91.
And his legacy is still so fiercely debated.
Oh, absolutely. It completely depends on who you ask. In the West, he's the man who ended the Cold War peacefully. A hero.
But in Russia?
For many there, he's the man who lost a great empire and brought on a decade of chaos and hardship.
In the end, he wanted to reform the system to make it stronger.
But his actions, glasnost and perestroika, they unleashed forces that nobody, not even him, could control. It led to the peaceful end of the Cold War, but also the total disappearance of his country. One of the most influential figures of the century, without a doubt.
Good luck with your studies.